you smell what the Rock is cooking?
Acknowledge me.
You don't know what hard times are, Daddy.
We are bad to the bone. Get it? Bad to the bone.
Tell me when I'm telling lies.
I'll fight anybody who do you want. Just let me fight him.
Let me tell you something, Jim Ross.
Mega power, yeah. We got it for you.
We are the best of the best.
Woo! Wheeling dealing. Smart marks.
And that's the bottom line, cause Stone Cold said so.
Listeners, welcome back to another episode of Talk 'em in the Building, a wrestling podcast where we talk about the talkers, we hype the hype man, and of course, we gotta pontificate on the promo. I'm Adrian. You already know it's no BS from me, and I'm honored as always to be joined by my wonderful co-host, my guy in Atlanta, Greg. How are you feeling? How are you living, my friend?
Man, I'm doing good. I'm ready to talk them into the building on this special Valentine's edition, man. This one's going to be fun. This one's going to be a lot of fun.
Definitely. And out west. Actually, let's pull back the curtain for a quick second there, listeners. The reason why we're doing this is not just because it's love in the air and Valentine's Day is around the corner, but we got a co-host who just got married. So let's go and give him a round of applause and all that love to he and his wonderful wife. What's going on, Adalid? How's life treating you?
I'm loving it. First Valentine's Day as a married man, so it's something else. I really gotta put in the effort over here. make it memorable.
Amen.
I need to get that reservation 2 months ago.
Nice. Well, like I said, man, the reason why we came up with this idea for this episode was not just because Valentine's around the corner, but we got a co-host who's celebrating his marriage. And one thing, I just celebrated my 1 year anniversary. Shout out to our wonderful graphic artist, Lois. She's great. She's tight. But one thing about marriage, one thing about these weddings, you get a whole bunch of advice, some good, some bad. So instead of asking you a question, Ali, I wanted it to be Greg and Adrian giving Adalid advice type situation, right? So Greg, I want to ask you, I want you to give advice to myself after my 1 year and Adalid going into his new marriage. Because you're an OG and you've been married, you've been blessed to be married all this time and have a wonderful family. What's your advice on marriage?
Oh, that's broad, bro. Oh, man. I think at the end of the day, understand it's not 50-50. It's 100-100. You both control this thing. You both have so much influence over the other. But a lot of times people want to say it's 50-50, which means I can't even be successful. I can't be 100% happy without you, right? And there's times I've got to carry 70% of the load. There's times I got to carry 100% of the load. And my attitude can 100% affect the entire marriage and vice versa. I think that's one of the things I've tried to live by. It's hard. I'm not gonna lie. The other thing is sometimes we gotta shut up, y'all. We gotta just be quiet and just listen, because men and women are different, man. I mean, and you don't always realize it until you get married, but they're more emotional than we are. We're more logical. We want to solve problems. And I know for myself, I want to solve, and sometimes they just want to talk. They want us to listen. And the art of it is try to listen. But hey, look, we're in this wrestling thing. We know how that works. The art of it is to make it feel like you're listening. So even if you're not totally listening, act like you are, right? And there's that. And I think that the other part is you got to serve each other.
Definitely.
And never look at, I expect her to serve me. We do have roles, and I do believe we have certain roles within marriage, but at the end of the day, you should serve each other. there's no reason that you shouldn't. I heard a pastor recently say this: you have company come to your house, and what's one of the first things? Hey, can I get you something to drink? Can I get you something to eat? Can I make some coffee or whatever? So we
Mm-hmm.
want to treat our company better than we treat our spouse.
Mm.
Why not go ahead and do that for them? Hey, baby, let me grab you a cup of coffee. Let me grab you some water or whatever. And I think those little pieces there, 100, listen, and serve each other.
I like that, man. That's some great advice, man. That's some great advice. Adalid, I'm only a year in, man. I'm not a grizzled vet just yet. Although sometimes it feels like it.
Yeah.
I got a little advice for you. Number one, it has to be you guys come up with some traditions.
Hmm.
That's one thing that Lois and I, even before we got married, we were big on we're gonna do these kind of little traditions throughout the year. Halloween, we're gonna do a jack-o'-lantern contest, carving
Mm.
contest. We're gonna do that.
Mhm.
Christmas, we make our own Christmas ornaments so that we can hang them on the tree. We'll put the date on it, and each year it's just getting more and more artistic, that sort of thing. Valentine's Day in particular, we do a paint and sip. Essentially, I make some fancy dinner, and we set up a little painting studio for both of us. And on the back we alternate, mind you, we alternate the setup of what's going to be the quote to inspire the painting.
Mm.
Hmm.
And it's got to be a
Mhm.
quote that represents love, or something that's some
Right.
proverb, or something to inspire the love and that sort of passion. Because one thing that I've learned, Pat, I mean, traditions traditions motivate you to go all out, because relationships, marriage, and all of that stuff, it's an everyday thing. It's not, you can't take a break from it. It's an everyday thing, and you want to always keep things fresh. And that's one way of doing it. Let's make some traditions. Let's go all in on it and do that sort of thing. And a big piece of advice, an immediate piece of advice in your first year of marriage, I would tell you, take as many pictures as possible.
Mm.
Mm.
Be
Yeah.
obnoxious about it. Be obnoxious about it. And you don't have to post it everywhere, but just have it. Just have it. Just have access to it, because you guys are building a family, you're building a legacy, and you want to ideally be that older couple with your grandkids wanting to look at pictures of you two growing together and building this legacy.
Yeah.
So that's my number one and two bits of advice for you. But before we get to you, Adalid, Greg, what's your one piece of advice going into his first year of marriage?
Man, reduce the noise.
Mm,
Mm.
Understand it's about y'all. It's not about her parents or her friends or your parents and your friends. And sometimes that's hard, right? Sometimes it's like that family thing. And even though, like Adrian said, those traditions, now the traditions are about y'all. It's not about
definitely.
anybody else. And that's going to hurt some feelings. I'll be honest with you. You got to be prepared to hurt those feelings.
Yep.
That,
Mhm.
you know what, you may on Easter or 4th of July or Christmas, you may want to start your own tradition that you don't get together with the family, and that's okay. And I think that's the other thing is understand that it's okay to be selfish
Yeah.
together and to tell the family no. I know that was one of the things that we struggle with. I'm not gonna lie, like we struggle with it, and we had to get to that point where it's like, this is us. This is about us. um Going a little spiritual, I mean, you talk about when you get married you leave your mom and dad. That's what it says in the Bible, not to take it all the way down that, but I do believe that, right? And you leave your family to become your own family. And
Mm,
so when you put that in perspective, whether you're spiritual or not, you're still doing that, right? You're still going to build your own legacy, kind of like Adrian said. And
Mhm.
the only way you can build that is to be your own legacy. Yes, you still have ties back to your mom, your dad, and to your, everybody else. But the only way you can build your own is to be your own.
That's dope, man. That's awesome. Adalid, what are your thoughts, man? You're getting gems, man.
Wow, man.
You and the listeners.
I'm glad this is recorded because I'm gonna go back and listen to this a couple of times. I appreciate. First of all, thank you for golden advice. Essentially, I think we, off the podcast we talked about, getting as much advice from folks that have been in good marriages, and or even like you guys know what you're talking about. That you're seeing marriage as something that's a journey. It's not all roses and petals and great, it's a wedding day and it's perfect. It's like it's an everyday grind, and you can have your ups and downs, but as long as you're faithful for the idea of growth in your relationship, you're not going to backtrack, right? And that makes me think of what you're saying. What I interpret it as is that growth has to happen through every iteration of the other person, and vice versa, right? You're growing together, and you might not be the same person 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, and being accepting that the person you love right now is going to change through natural evolution, through their own growth, through their own pursuits, and respecting that. And I know that's something that I fell in love with, with Yvette, because she's seen my growth and I seen her growth, and we push each other and we support each other, and we're that constant for each other, and we can talk about very openly about things. So, to Adrian's point, I think creating tradition is super valuable because it unifies you, right? And it gives you that what to look forward to, and you can reinvent it and you can change it. And we were looking at our first Christmas and how we can do that. We're big on road trips. Like that's become a pretty constant in our relationship, and that's been great, right? We don't have to plan too much. We just have a couple points of interest, and it's literally about the journey. It's literally about getting there, and if we're late or not, it doesn't matter. And then to Greg's point of view, yeah, creating your own identity. I like the idea of legacy, because identity almost feels like it's something that's temporary, that's just in the moment, whereas legacy has this broad, real, long lasting view that you're building it brick by brick, right?
Definitely.
And like any pro wrestler, we're fans of reinvention, right? So if we're reinventing ourselves with our partner, then that relationship is never going to be stagnant. It's always going to be growing. It's always going to be fresh. So I appreciate the words of advice, because going into it, that I got a piece of advice at a friend's party last time, and someone who's been married for 7 years, so they've been in it for a little bit, and they told me, our goal is to be together for 30 years. Then we changed it to 40 years, and then we said 50 years. And when you put that perspective with a number like that, and you put age with it, right, it really puts in perspective disagreements, differences of opinion. Is like, where are we going? Like, this is our end goal. How are we going to get there, right? So I appreciate it, gentlemen. That's incredible advice that I will definitely be heeding as I continue on.
No, definitely, man. Like I said, salute to you and your lovely bride, and best of luck in your first year and moving forward, for sure.
Yes, for sure.
But before we get started, I want to say, if this is your first time listening to this podcast, this is not a relationship podcast. Don't worry.
Maybe it is.
If you haven't already, like, comment, subscribe, and of course, look us up on socials at Suplex Dinner Club. And be sure to check out our other projects. We talk college football on Dogs versus All Y'all. That's a weekly college football podcast where we don't just talk about the Georgia Bulldogs. We talk about all things college football. The Life and Times pod, which is short for the Life and Times of a Restaurant Lifer podcast, where I have some chill conversations with some cool and interesting people that I've met in my years in the hospitality industry. And of course, check out Talk 'em in the Building. That's a pro wrestling podcast where we solely focus on the promo. We talk about the talkers, we hype the hype man, and we pontificate on the promo. It's a fun project, and if you're a pro wrestling fan, I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. If you're into TV and movie reviews, check out Four Corners Cinema with Ari and Adrian, a podcast where two lifelong pro wrestling fans review film and other forms of media that just so happen to have some of our favorite pro wrestlers. The Suplex Dinner Club family is growing, and I would love for you to be a part of it. This is, once again, this is Talk 'em in the building. We're a pro wrestling podcast that solely focuses on the promo. So, promos, segments, and great moments in this sport that we all love. So, today, once again, it's love in the air. We got a co host who's just got married, and we're super excited for him. We have selected a couple of our favorite weddings and whatnot segments or wedding moments in professional wrestling. So I want to start off with you, Greg, because actually, I'm sorry, Greg, before we even get started there, because you've mentioned it, and I definitely want to hear about your experience. You were at Teddy Long's wedding, right?
Correct.
The segment there in Atlanta.
Yes.
And wasn't Jagged Edge there and those guys? And
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
All right. So shout out to those guys. Greg, I want to know about that experience because you had some funny notes about that experience for sure.
So it was a SmackDown, and if you've ever been to a SmackDown or a Raw live anyway, it's a TV show, right? So you're gonna be there.
Right.
It's not action the whole
Yep.
time. It's fun to be there. And this thing just felt like it took forever. And the coolest thing to me was seeing Doom come out because Ron Simmons and Butch Reed together with Teddy, right? Because Teddy used to, being in that same building, well, in the same place. They used to go in the Omni. But if for anybody who
Right.
doesn't know, State Farm Arena, back then it was called Phillips Arena, it's built on the same footprint, the same exact place that the Omni was. So having, as a kid, gone to see WCW and see Teddy Long come out with Doom in the masks, without the masks, that was a cool throwback to me that they were there. But beyond that, dude, it was so long, and the fans totally turned, and that did not come across that way on TV. This is the time when
Right.
SmackDown was taped, if I'm not mistaken,
Mhm.
and they edited out the fans. The fans were chanting, "We want wrestling. This sucks."
Oh no.
It was
That breaks
the
my
"We want wrestling"
illusion.
thing was, this isn't wrestling. I mean, all this. I mean, the fans totally turned on it. And at the point where Teddy fell out, people started booing. And so it was just a mess. I'm sure WWE in the background was just like, okay, edit all this stuff out. We got to
Yeah, we
block
gotta
out all
dress
these
this up.
fans.
Yeah.
It was just awful, man. And I swear it took up, I'm sure it didn't, but I felt like it took over an hour. I mean, it took forever because the whole setup and everything at the time. And man, it was awful. I'm not gonna lie. Now, when I watched it on TV, it did come off as awful as it did in live. But man, it was just like we left like this was a waste of my time, to the point that I was like, I'm not coming back to another SmackDown or Raw. I'm just not. It's just that wasn't worth my time. Yeah, it was bad, man. It was bad. I love Teddy. And to me, when we talk about talents across all of wrestling, that is one of the most underrated talents ever in the history of wrestling.
Yes,
We talk
sir.
about talking him into the building. The dude could talk you into the building as a heel manager. Back in WCW, he was good. Whether he was with Johnny B. Bad, whether he was with Doom, whoever he was with, he could talk you in. When he became a general manager, he was awesome. He reinvented himself. But if you remember, he was a referee first. If you go back to that original trilogy, that I'll still argue the best trilogy of all time, Chi-Town Rumble '89, the referee that raised Ricky Steamboat's hand was Teddy Long.
Oh wow. Okay.
So he's a referee, kind of becomes a bad referee, and then becomes a manager.
Right.
Transitions to WWE as a referee. I don't know if you guys remember that, but he came into WWE as a
That's
ref.
right.
That's right.
And then ended up becoming, more of a manager and more of a talking head and all of that. So here's somebody who could ref, who actually ran his own promotion here in Atlanta for several years, who could talk you into the building from a manager standpoint, could be a commentator at times. He could be the general manager, entertaining as hell. He booked Undertaker in more matches than anybody else in the history of wrestling. But the guy, to me, is so underrated. I mean, when you look at Hall of Famers, you look at the people talk about Bobby the Brain and how talented he was, and I'm not taking anything away from that, but he could do everything. But so could Teddy.
Definitely. And
I would argue that Teddy was a better babyface. You think about it as a general manager, Adrian, you and I have talked about before, the greatest of all time have to be able to be on both sides of that fence.
Definitely.
When you look at certain of the talents that we talk about being great, they weren't great on both sides of the fence. Teddy was.
That's a great point. That's a
but
great point, man.
In this wedding, acting was not Teddy's strong point. So that heart attack, everybody was like, "Oh, you've got to be kidding me." I mean, but you're going to try to marry Crystal. It was a little bit too much suspending disbelief. You already had to suspend disbelief that he was marrying Crystal. So there was that.
True. This is true.
As a TV viewer at the time, was in and out, right? I was watching here and there. I have to say, very different, and maybe your experience is colored because you were there, and I have a similar experience when another wedding that I was live for, another wrestling wedding. I love that segment so much. I love the whole. I don't know who decided to book Jagged Edge. I'm like, yo, what's going on? And then like the Godfather came back, and like you look in the crowd. Like I was just showing this to my wife, and she was like, "Is that CM Punk?" It's like, "Oh, he looks so young. What's going on?" And like Kendrick is there, and they're like it's an amazing TV segment from a production point of view. So to hear you say that they edited the booth, they did a pretty good job, because I did not notice a thing. I thought the crowd was with it, even because you could see that the whole people that were on the opposite side of the camera probably had no view whatsoever.
That's
anyway,
true.
I'm a big fan. I love Bruce. Everything about that segment was brilliant to me.
Thanks. Nice. All right. Well, let's get back to you, Greg. I want to see what do you have for the listeners today?
All right, so I had to think about all these different weddings, right? And some of them have been good, some of them have been bad. Then I was like, oh, the one that stands out to me is, of course, Miss Stephanie McMahon and one Andrew Martin, aka Test. Or was it really their wedding? Make sure I got the right one here.
And all of us are sure to remember.
Should there be anyone who has cause why this couple should not be united in marriage, they must speak now or forever hold their peace. Andrew, do you take Stephanie to be your wife?
How great was this music, though?
It's my favorite.
Easy, Vince. Now, I know earlier you said that no family member or anybody that wasn't invited should get involved in this, but I really felt that you should take a look at this.
I, Hunter, take you, Stephanie.
I, Hunter, take you, Stephanie.
For my wife.
For my wife. All right. With this ring, I thee wed.
I promise to love you.
Mama, God, can't you get the idea? I promise to love you. Donnie,
His voice is so high
all
pitched.
the days of my life. Here we go.
Stephanie, you place the ring upon his
She'll get
hand.
it for me there. Here we go. Okay, she's doing it. Yeah.
She's doing it. I, Stephanie,
I Stephanie, take you, Hunter.
excuse me.
For my husband.
I promise you.
I promise to love, honor, and definitely obey everything you say.
Okay, so by the power vested in me by the state of Nevada, and here the little white temple right within you, I condemn you as a You are legally married.
Hey, Jake, get that stuff out of the trunk and throw it on the car, would you?
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
Drive carefully.
All right.
Have a nice honeymoon.
Hey, get a nice shot of the brand new Mr. and Mrs. Hunter Hurst Helmsley.
Bye. Drive careful.
Now, Vince, as a member of the immediate family, I know that you can only have one question on your mind, Dad. Oh my God!
I hate you.
And that is,
I hate you.
not did we, but how many times did we consummate the marriage? God, I cannot believe that. Triple H.
Nice.
Man, I remember that. Oh, dude, that was so good. But what it kicked off, well, before we get to what kicked off, I mean, that right there was just so unexpected because the whole test thing, because you're like, test? So, but they played it up so well, right? I mean, because at the time, Stephanie's big baby face, Vince has gone big baby face. They're all like, okay, that's fine, it's test. And you're expecting all this to happen. Nobody saw this coming. Nobody saw Triple H coming out like that. And before we go, can't we talk about his underrated theme song that was? That to me was one of the best theme songs, dude.
Definitely.
I love the game and I love King of Kings, but that one is my time, man. But it was just to me, and then we talked about suspending disbelief. That was just pure comedy gold to me. Like him, hi Stephanie. Oh, dude, it was just so funny. It was just hilarious. But then what it led into, where she played Test, like the whole thing was a setup by both of them, where it was like we talk about talking them into the building, but talking them into the building is a storyline, right? It's not just always just that one promo or that one piece. And this is a time when they did storylines so well. And so it was that here's the test piece, here's Triple H coming out, I hate you, Hunter, I hate you, and Vince getting all mad. And then it leads to where she was actually a part of it and turns on Vince. Dude, that whole thing was so well thought out and just launched, I mean, a whole nother era. I mean, what do you guys think? Adalid, what do you think about that one?
I mean, that you're getting into like peak when I was like watching wrestling and loving every minute of it, right? And in retrospect, just how much life imitates, art imitates life and vice versa, right? That we can do a whole podcast episode on that, on with the ramifications and the fallout for that. But purely as a TV segment, I mean, it has all the elements. It has goofy looking Vince looking, astonished that this happened when he's probably done much worse things on TV up to this point, and he has to act the part, right? Like, oh my gosh, how dare you? But I think overlooked is Stephanie is relatively new to all of this. I mean, she's done a few things here and there, but she's in her element. I mean, that just because you're a McMahon doesn't mean you're going to have guaranteed success, but she stepped into the role and she owned it. And and then the aftermath later when, she's fully in with Hunter, and that really develops that character. I mean, there's a complete through line there to like the modern, before she left and she was still an on-screen character, but it's really overlooked how well paced that whole process was because the vignettes sell it. The vignettes give you that backstory.
Definitely.
Even if you haven't been watching, they were always really good about giving you that. That's what's the WWE's always done really well. Those production packages catch you up in like 5 minutes and you're back on board. You're well within the story. And that promo finally makes sense, right? It's a silly promo. It's, in the context, but it's, it shows why he is where he is, because as we know with Hunter now, with, seeing that kind of that embryonic stage of NXT, he was trying things out, and I can see him developing, kind of being the creative type, because as we know later, he was in there for these creative meetings. This was kind of his first shot at leading and telling Vince, well, I like this better, and maybe we could try this. And I'm sure that played a role in, Vince having that confidence in him to take that leadership role. And it was really interesting to see that he's essentially being the player coach, right? He's doing the stuff behind the scenes, and then he's the star, right? This is the segment where he was getting put over the top, and this was the main segment. This was not Rock. This was not Austin. This was him and McMahon. And it was really interesting to see it develop. Really great segment.
Yeah, what do you think, Adrian?
Definitely. I meant, though, to echo what Adalid was saying, props to Stephanie McMahon and her reactions and her "I hate you." You could see the tears in her eyes, and it was something about a babyface damsel in distress, Stephanie McMahon, back then. And it was just a perfect setup for when she screwed over her dad. I don't think any of us none of us expected that. None of us. At least I didn't, for sure. But the segment that I brought, Stephanie is playing a MVP role in that as well, man.
Nice. Before we get there, I want to go back to this one. So we just talked about Teddy Long, and we said how horrible his acting was. You just touched on how well did Stephanie do? How great does Vince sell it? Because to me, Vince wasn't over the top. He wasn't crazy Vince, right? He was like mad. But Test too. Test, this was a big opportunity. You guys just talked about Triple H and how this was huge for him. This was huge for Test. I mean, he was kind of like that mid-carder that was kind of like, he's kind of this floating around. And they put him in this. This is huge. It elevates him. Never takes him to where they probably wanted him to get to, but it does elevate him, but it showed his range.
Yeah.
And that's what I thought it was cool. It's like when you go back and watch it, Shane sells it. Triple H sells it. Test sells it. Vince sells it. And Stephanie puts the icing on the cake. And it's just, to me, it was just like, especially when you look back, because knowing where it goes, it's like, man, Stephanie sold this so well. Not just that week, right? It was a few weeks. And she played it so well. And that's when, Adalid, you kind of talked about how new she was into the business. That's when you sat back and go, man, this girl's a natural.
She had
Oh
something.
my gosh.
Absolutely.
Oh, I would say she was better than Vince at the end of the day. I mean, more versatile. I think Vince was always a little bit over the top.
Vince is cartoonish all the time.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, this was one of my favorites. I mean, there's so many to choose from, but this one, when I was trying to think of different ones, I was like, oh man, that one popped into my brain, because just the whole drive-through piece was hilarious to me. I mean, not just because they did it, but just by the fact that it exists.
Yeah,
it's hilarious to me, because I do remember looking that up after this show, going, "Is this real?" And it is, right? And they actually have drive-through weddings in Vegas.
And purely from like because for me, wrestling is a lot of theater. I mean, it really is. However many rehearsals they had, or run-throughs, or with maybe they rehearsed this without the people in the crowd yet. Sometimes they opened up the building early like that. They get one shot at this, right? Beyond the promo package, this is it. It's sink or swim. So any one of the players doesn't do their part correctly, it kind of crumbles, kind of falls apart a little bit, and you forget that suspending disbelief. So everybody played the role to perfection, really.
Yeah,
that's a fact, man. That's a fact. Adalid, what promo did you bring?
I will share. So initially, I was gonna share the Teddy Long segment, but I feel like I could go on for days. I could do a whole half hour on that because I love it. But I'm gonna bring another promo, keeping in the theme of it's not a promo, it's a segment. Keeping in the theme of weddings that we've seen live. So I've seen one wrestling wedding live. It was Lucha Underground. Surprise, surprise, because it was very local to me. However, it is not the first couple of seasons that everybody exalts, everybody loves. It's kind of towards the end where they were not even shooting episodes in order anymore, and even us watching, we're like,
Right.
when is this going to air? When did this happen? And what led up to this? So we were lost as a crowd. And it's the
Right.
marriage of Johnny Mundo and Taya Valkyrie or Taya. It's completely ridiculous, but to give you perspective, I was running a pro wrestling club at the time for the school that I worked at the time, and I got permission. I got all the forms. Everything was legal, and this was our pro wrestling club field trip. So we took the kids to this field trip.
Nice.
Chaperones had the whole thing, and the kids, it was cool because the kids were like enthralled, like, oh wow, this is a production. This isn't just a TV. This isn't just a wrestling show. It's like, yeah, you could be the cameraman. You don't have to be a wrestler. You can do like so many other jobs. You could be a production designer if you wanted. And it's a segment that will speak for itself. It's essentially the moment we saw the cake come out, I was like, it's game on. Somebody's going through that cake. And it's a classic pro wrestling wedding that's gonna get ruined, and I'll leave it at that. So
The wedding of Taya and Johnny Mundo, presided over by Famous B.
We are here tonight to witness, to join the wedded bliss of John Edward Mundo and Taya Valkyrie. I now pronounce you man, and holy shit, what the hell is that?
What? That's the Monster Matanza Cueto, and evidently the party has been disrupted by an uninvited guest. Holy. He's backing up and he's oh! Why?
there we go.
Man, Jesus.
So what you should know is whoever did the run sheet or the order for that day kind of messed up, because you think they would do this last, right? They would wait till the end of the night. It's gonna be no, smack dab in the middle of the night. So you had cleaning crew wiping like frosting off the robes. It was a mess and a half. I mean, the people were like grabbing pieces of the table with the frosting to take. It was incredibly messy. Great segment once everything was set up. It was fun, but again, it was recorded out of order. We had no clue where this was leading up to. There was a gentleman there, one of the wrestlers. I know his real name, but anyway, he has like a doll, and that hadn't been introduced yet, so none of it made sense. So we're just reacting. We're like, okay, it's a wrestling wedding. What are you going to do about it?
Right.
I'm out of ball because live, we had good seats. We weren't behind because it's a very small arena. But it was fun. It was what it was, and Matanza was kind of on the trail end. I think they were about to kill him off on the show. And sorry for those listeners that last time I ruined the fact that Prince Puma is Ricochet. I got news for you guys. Jeff Cobb's a real nice guy. That's all I'm saying. Thoughts, gentlemen. What do you guys think? I know it was a short clip.
Nah, that was fun, man. That was definitely fun, and I can only imagine being like that close as you guys were. That was one thing I always loved about Lucha Underground setup. It was so intimate, and you guys are like right on top of all of the action. So, and shout out to Famous B. I almost forgot about my guy. I loved him. He was one of my favorites during
Super
Lucha
underrated.
Underground.
Yep.
And I need to look up what he's doing now because he was awesome, man. I loved Famous B. He was hilarious.
And for me, that was it was good from the standpoint of like so predictable that you knew, like you said,
Yes.
when you see the cake or whatever. But the nice thing about it is you got some workers who don't mind going through a lot. Like those chair spots, I mean, not table, the table spots were rough. And so, and honestly, Mundo's not the person I would expect to be in that. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just that has never been him, right? He's always been the cool dude, or he's always the high flyer or something. He's not the character like that. And normally you have characters doing this type of stuff, right? And that one, which cool, because also this is real life one, right? But it's I think that's probably something they probably look back on pretty fond. I think that's a fun one, but I think that hearing you talk about it and that how everything was out of context, and you're kind of sitting there going like, I don't even know what's happening. Like, how did we get here? Where are we going after this? And to your point, why would you do that in the middle of the show? Like, what are you thinking? Like, especially in a show like that, because they're taping multiple shows, right? So I just can't imagine that. Like, I obviously I never went there, but I went to Center Stage back in the day when they taped monster number of shows. I can't imagine them doing that in the middle, right? And then having to clean up all that because it would take forever. I'm
And
sure.
my memory's like not the best all the time, but I specifically remember them cleaning, and it was like no, because they were going to record more. They were going to keep going for the rest of the night. But to your point, these later seasons of Lucha Underground, especially that one, just got weird. They were like, we don't know what's going to happen here, so we're just going to throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks, and we're just going to have fun with it, for better or worse. This was one of the ones that if I'd seen it on TV, I probably wouldn't have given a passing thought as much, or I probably would have stopped and watched it. But I knew what was going to happen, so I'm like, oh, I wonder how this is going to play it on TV, and if it's going to be just as fun. And it was silly, it was incredibly predictable, like you said, but sometimes that's okay.
Yeah. I love that we have multiple Lucha Underground segments on this podcast because that honestly that was one of my favorite moments of pro wrestling. At least during that time, it was so unique, so different. It was almost bizarre, but also shot beautifully at times. The cinematic scenes or whatnot. I loved it. I personally loved it. I know a lot of purists hated it. I know Cornette hated it, but I loved Lucha Underground, man. I loved and appreciated it for sure. But let's get into my segment. Man, when it comes down to it, I'm an attitude error kid, and I couldn't escape it. I wanted to do the Macho Man Liz wedding reception and that segment and all that. That was beautiful. Of course, you had Edge and Lita with Kane interrupting. I wanted to do that, but damn it, I had to go with my heart. And my segment has to do with Undertaker, Stephanie McMahon, and the conquering hero, the guy despite his hate for his boss, who stepped up to do the right thing. And that was Stone Cold.
And Steve Austin, well, I guess he just showed his true colors as well. Paul, let the ceremony begin.
Vince tried to live up to the agreement. He wasn't there. Stephanie, this is so sickening with this demonic human being. What kind of ceremony? I have no idea.
Dearly and beloved, we gather here this evening to join Stephanie McMahon
Listen to Stephanie, man.
and the unholy wedlock with the Lord of Darkness.
Oh, wedlock. It's a marriage ceremony.
Stephanie Marie McMahon will step from the light on this evil cesspool mortal world into the sanctuary of eternal darkness. Keeping this in mind, will you, Stephanie Marie McMahon, accept the purity of evil and take the Lord of Darkness as your master and your spouse?
Hell no, she's not. Wait a minute, look! There's Shamrock! King Shamrock! Shamrock with a ball bat! But Shamrock taken down quickly by the acolytes. Oh, God! That's 500 pounds of viscera! Just broke Shamrock apart! They trapped him before he had a chance to use that belt, that bat!
Hold on! If it gets bad, we'll make our move. Not until then. You guys, just chill out. Trust me, just chill out.
To accept Stephanie Marie McMahon, her body, her mind, her soul, and even her breath unto yourself, and allow her to bear your offspring. Yes.
Look! The Big Show! The Big Show's here! It's showtime! And the Big Show just caught Farouk! And here comes the big man and Viscera attacking the Big Show! Right hand by... And the Big Show's getting through the line of defense! The Big Show is swinging! The Big Show is destroying whatever... Oh, God! Oh! Undertaker just shot that ball bat! Undertaker just hit the
jacked.
Big Show with a ball bat! And they're on him now! They're on him!
Power vested in me by the Lord of Darkness, I now pronounce you as the unholy union of darkness. You may now kiss your bride.
Oh, for God's sake! God, here it comes! Stone Cold! Stone Cold! Stone Cold and The Undertaker going toe-to-toe! Midian from behind! Austin fighting for all he's got! The ceremony is over! The ceremony's over! Good God! Good Lord! Wham! Oh my! Austin with a steel chair! He didn't do it for the love of Vince McMahon! There goes Viscera! He just did it because it was right! What a shot! Stone Cold! Weapons in hand! Assaulting the ministry! Stone Cold! I guarantee you, he didn't do this for Vince McMahon. He's doing it because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, man. That was it. That was it. Much like the first segment that we referenced, where everyone played their roles to perfection. I think in this segment, it even goes further when you're talking about the commentary team.
Yep.
JR and Cornette were bringing it together. When you have Paul Bearer asking Stephanie, obviously she's screaming, she's shrieking no at this point. He's like, will you take her as your husband? And she's screaming no, and JR's like, you heard her say no, damn it. Like, it's that kind of stuff, man. And then you add some of the guys who came out, Ken Shamrock and Big Show, mid-card baby faces at the time, trying to be their heroes, but they get their ass kicked by these guys. And it takes the last guy that Vince would ever imagine to try to help him in any way whatsoever. Stone Cold ultimately doing the right thing. And Cornette brought it home toward the end of that, saying Stone Cold did the right thing. It was the right thing to do. And it was just, I mean, I loved it, man. What are your thoughts, Adalid?
It's funny because we watched the segment and there's this piece towards the end where Stephanie is like appreciating Stone Cold, right? She's like, and he's conflicted. He's like, this isn't me. I'm not this, I'm not the good guy that's here to save the damsel in distress, but he takes it, right? He's like, it's the right thing to do. And it fit his character at the time because he was still anti-authority, he was still, corporate or corporate ministry, whatever it became. But it was an interesting segment. We can get into, the evolution of the Undertaker. This was very clearly me one of my favorite like Undertaker eras because it was so spooky, and he was really leaning into that cult aspect and stuff that was polar opposite of anything that we'd see any other character on the screen. But going back to it, props to Stephanie McMahon because she makes the segment. Without her, I love the descriptor you use with shrieking. It's not yelling. It's not asking for. It's literal shrieking that pierces your. Those mics don't pick up everything, and they are picking up her voice. You better believe it. But yeah, I really thoroughly enjoyed the segment. And funny enough, when I was doing research for the pod, this is one of the ones that I showed my wife, and she's probably tired because I showed her so many wrestling wedding segments at this point. But it's like, oh wow, and a lot of us like, oh wow, she looks so young, or oh wow, the Undertaker just had a goatee. But anyway, she enjoyed it as well, and like except the part with the cross and stuff, she's like, wait, is that supposed to be kind of sacrilegious? I'm like, yeah, it was the Attitude Era. That was kind of the thing.
Yeah, this is a fact. Greg, what about you, man?
Man, you pointed out a few things about the commentating team. As they're talking, it's like, and Adalid, you kind of pointed out the evolution of the Undertaker. But what about the evolution of Paul Bearer? The way he's talking, what he's saying, how he's saying it is so different than when they were the dead man and the funeral director, if you will. It was just like, he was so good.
Yeah.
He was so good. And then, like you said about Stephanie shrieking, it was a shriek of desperation. It wasn't a shriek of I'm just screaming or I'm just shrieking. It was you could feel it in her facials. Were like, I don't know what else to do. What am I going to do? Is very much that damsel in distress, to use a catchphrase, but a legit one, right? It was very believable. Like it wasn't a constant screech. It was a screech and then a facial of like, I don't know what to do. Ken Shamrock just tried. I don't know what to do. Big Show just tried. I don't know what to do. You hear the crowd to start to chant Austin, but the crowd's kind of like, he ain't coming. I mean, because if they really thought he was, they would have been going crazy chanting Austin.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think it was that type of, he may be our only hope. Is like, and that's what was so cool about this segment, because Taker was so different and so demonic at the time, which is interesting because you think about the Attitude Era and people say, oh, the characters didn't work. Yeah, they did. Because Taker was a character.
Yeah.
He became the American Badass later, but he was a character that was working. And Paul Bearer was a character that was working different than it was when he debuted. But I think that's to your point. Like, this was a very cool synopsis of different promo styles of what they're used to. Like, when I think Paul Bearer, that's not what I think about. When I think Undertaker, that was not what I think about. But that is what I think about when I hear Jim Ross. And when you hear Jim Ross today, I'm like, oh man, could we have that one back? The passionate one, the one that cares, the one that's invested. And then Jim Cornette, to me, is one of the best color guys of all time. I mean, he adds something different. King was great. King had a very different style and a different delivery and some of the quick, whips and stuff like that, or the quips. But Cornette could bring that, but he could also bring these other pieces of the elements, right? And I thought that was cool because, like you said, when he said that about Austin, it was like he brought it together, and it was just very cool. It's a good segment. It's a really good segment.
Yeah, it was always one of my favorites. That was instantly one of the first ones that I thought of. But I I was like, man, you got to do Macho Liz. You got to do that. But I was like, nah, I got to do that Unholy Wedding, man.
There's so many out there, man. There was,
Yeah.
I mean, if I can give you an honorable mention that I thought about
Yeah.
was the one with Billy and Chuck.
Yes. Oh my
I
gosh.
And I
almost
didn't
did
pick it
that,
because I
man. I
thought maybe
almost
y'all
did that.
were going to, because not just how good they were, but Bischoff.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
man, I don't know if you've ever heard him tell that story of that whole day. Have y'all ever heard him talk
They
about
didn't know
that?
it was him, right?
Mm-mm.
He was under makeup the
They
whole
had no
day.
clue because he hadn't been there. He hadn't been in the
Right.
even in the company. So they had him come do that. He was in makeup, and he said he talked to everybody from Stephanie to, like, walked around and talked to everybody in character the whole day, that nobody had a
That's
clue it was him.
insane, man.
That's
Nobody.
hilarious.
And I'm like, man, he said it was the most fun he's ever had. And it's just like, I've heard him tell it a couple of different
Right.
times. And it's just like, you could just see it when he talks about it. It should be one of those something we look at one day, just him talking about it, because it's just like he has so much fun. But can I tell y'all one other wedding that I went to?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, I don't have video because it was an independent
Mm.
show. But, and this is many years ago, and they used to run this weekly show downtown Atlanta, and we would go, and they did a wedding. And this was, and of course, tradition, all the same stuff, right? Just have the wedding, somebody interrupts, da 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 da. Dude, they had this crowd so wrapped into their hands that when they did the wedding, fans brought gifts.
Wow.
Nice.
And when I mean gifts, I don't mean like flowers. I mean china.
What?
I mean silverware.
What?
It's like, yo, this is beautiful. Yes, man. It was
That's awesome.
awesome. But it also tells you that, people do buy in and they get into it. And it's again, it was, I wish I had video. Like, if I had video of it, you would just see.
That's
And
cool.
I mean, it's just talking to somebody afterwards was like, they were like, oh, when we saw they brought gifts, we're like, we got them.
That's
I'm like,
awesome, man.
yeah, and it wasn't like one or two gifts; it was several. And it's like, what are y'all gonna do with it? They ended up donating them, right?
Okay.
But they kept them. They didn't give them back. They kept them, but they
Mhm.
gave them. They donated them to some charity, which was cool. But I was just like, man, how awesome is that? Like, you have them sucked into a different level, man. It was
You
awesome.
didn't just talk. You didn't just talk them in the building. You talked some gifts into the
Yeah.
building as
Dude,
well.
you
So,
talked them to the store. You
right.
talked them to spend
Talked them
money.
to the registry, right?
But
You talked
you
to them to
talked
a
them to the registry.
conversation.
You
Like what?
you
This
talked them
hue
into
of
buying
China's better
something,
than the other one.
and then you talked them into buying a ticket. So not only did they spend money on you for a ticket, they spent money on you for a gift. I'm like, man,
Yeah, that's
it was
wild.
awesome. Yeah.
That's awesome. All right. Well, last segment, as always, is promos surround us. We pick a promo. We pick a moment outside of professional wrestling to prove how powerful and how important the promo is. And it was one in pop culture that just stood out to me immediately, being a 90s baby. And it's the classic tale of the underdog nerd character falling in love with the pompous, sometimes a heel, sometimes a baby face, rich socialite
Mm.
young lady. And that story that I have for you guys comes from A Different World, which is a 90s classic.
Yeah.
And the moment I have is when Dwayne Wayne interrupted Whitley Gilbert's wedding
Mm.
and basically walked away the winner.
Go on, Reverend. Go on.
I can't until she responds.
Well, she means yes.
Well, she's got to say yes.
I will.
Will you? Blessed are those who ask the questions, brother.
Whitley, I love you, and if you'll have me, I want you to be my wife. What the hell are you doing? Hey, I'm sorry, Byron. I love her.
Die! Just die!
Let him go, man. Will you have me, Dwayne, as your lawfully wedded husband from this day forth to having a whole and richer for poorer? Baby, please. Please.
I do. You all heard it. You heard it. She said, and I do.
But to whom?
Well, I'm sorry, Byron. No.
Is anybody getting married here today?
Oh, hey, hold it. Right there. Thank you, Mr. Gaines. Yes, we get married.
Without-
I'm Dwayne.
By the powers vested in me, I now pronounce you man and we'll get forward to do it, bro.
Wait! What is going on here?
Hi, Ma.
That's that one, man. That's a classic moment in a lot of households in the 90s, man. Classic moment.
Love the live audience reaction because that's shot in front of a live crowd. There ain't no laugh track there, man, and that really adds so
Right.
much to it.
Yeah,
And
man.
that was
Yeah, it was-
long-term storytelling.
Yes. Yes.
That was
Yes.
really long-term storytelling. If you go back to the roots of that, they hated
Mhm.
each other.
They were mortal enemies. He was a nerd. No woman liked him or cared anything about the guy. Once he got out of school, that's when he got or it was even before he graduated. Didn't he go over to Japan like a summer or something to work for that big company? And then he comes back and he's dressing nice and he looks all confident because he's making this money. And Whitley on the other end, she comes to Hillman as the rich, spoiled brat. And throughout her college days, she's struggling more. And she gets to the point where she's looking at him like, man, he's blowing up. He's doing good. He's actually looking good. I care about him. Then they get together, they break up. And then it gets to this point where she gives up and she goes with Byron, this older guy who's established, the perfect husband, frankly, for her. And she ignores all of that. She ignores her mom. Shout out to Diane Carroll, classic actress and terrific performance by her mother. And she ignores all of that to go back to Dwayne. It's a like I said, it's a memorable segment for a lot of our households. Everybody, I mean, if you didn't watch A Different World, please go back and at least check it out, because after the first season, go second season on, and you got some really high quality TV. Greg, what are your thoughts? I know you saw this. You experienced.
Oh, for sure, for sure. I mean, Whitley was the heel, man. Whitley,
Yeah.
I mean, from the moment Denise hit that campus and we started watching in the first season. I know you said just skip the first season, but I can't.
Yeah, the first season
So
was some
soon as she hit that first season, Dwayne was after Denise,
Oh yeah.
if you
Yeah.
remember. And Denise being from the Cosby Show, if for anybody who is not familiar, A Different World was a spinoff of the Cosby Show. Denise was there for like a year, but that was it. But and Marissa Tomei was in there too. But
Yep, she was in season 1.
Yep, and but then yeah, so she was the heel for the longest. She was the one that was screwing over everybody else. She was the one that was, the rich kid and all of that. So you kind of see that whole evolution, right? It's kind of like you look at that whole story arc. It's like you just said, and then they kind of go back and forth, and she kind of makes a face turn and goes back to being a heel, and then boom, right back to being a face. So, I got to bring it back to wrestling, but
Definitely.
yeah. I mean, I think by that time of that show, I will say this: it kind of jumped the shark, but it was still a big piece, right? It was later into the show, but such a good show, man. That whole show from jump. I mean, even season 1 had a lot of good moments and a lot of real talk. especially for the time, because at the time we did not have a lot of shows with real talk.
Definitely.
We had a lot of fantasy shows, and
definitely,
man, for sure. But that was a big moment. And I remember that being what they used to call water cooler talk, right? You heard about it the next day. Nowadays, you hear about it on Twitter or TikTok blowing up or reaction videos and stuff like that. And you would, like, if that thing happened today, you would have those reaction videos. You would have all that just blow up, boom. But back then it was like, man, did you see a different world last night? Yeah.
But yeah, that was a awesome moment in TV history. What a time to be alive if you were a 90s baby, or at least in the 90s existing. But fellas, man, this was a awesome episode. I wish you guys and your significant others a terrific Valentine's Day. Listeners, I wish you guys the same. One thing we can all agree on, one thing we can all say that we love is obviously the promo of professional wrestling. So we're very thankful for y'all to spend some time with us. We're a couple episodes in. We're building something great, fellas, and I'm looking forward to our next episode for sure. You guys got any last thoughts or anything?
One of the things, wish everybody a happy Valentine's Day. I know that, one thing we do love is the promo. We love professional wrestling. That's one thing we can all agree upon, right? And so, I mean, that's about it for now. I love doing this podcast, and I appreciate everybody who's listening, who's, subscribed to it. We definitely want your feedback. Tell us some promos you want us to talk about, some storylines you want us to talk about, anything that's promo related, even if it's not wrestling.
Yeah.
I mean, there's promos around us all the time. So just hit us up, send us some clips, and let us talk about them.
And we'll react the same way that we were pontificating about a different time. Because, we love the promo, and, there's so many places. So those of you that are listening, thank you for your support. Likewise, I will echo that. And we love your show ideas too. So if there's anything, we've been talking about analyzing pro wrestlers and their evolution. So if you have a favorite that you want us to look at, shout it out.
Oh yeah. Well, listeners, we will see you guys in 2 weeks for another episode of Talk 'em in the Building.